Alright, let's have a look at Capablanca playing against first e4 with the black pieces. He usually responded with e5 clearly, but in some cases he also liked to switch around a little bit and play the Caro-Kann. And you can see he's following the main lines here, which are now the main lines, but it's interesting that even back then the players naturally followed these moves. I'm playing with h4 here by Spielmann. And Caro-Kann was of course also an opening which was suiting Capablanca well, because it's also a super solid opening, and as we've already seen in the previous videos, this is just what Capablanca liked to play. He was definitely not a Sicilian opening player. Yeah, and here, well, just a solid position for black on the board. Alright, now e5, which was clearly his main move, and once again it's the right move for Capablanca, because e5 is a super solid choice. Knight f3, knight c6. In most cases he was confronted with bishop b5 here, but also knight c3, what he played himself, the Spanish four knights variation, he got on the board quite a few times. Bishop b5, and in a game against Ayekin he played in knight d4, which is a decent move definitely against this line. And Ayekin, maybe he didn't really feel like playing that much this day, because he chose to take off a lot of material right at the beginning of the game, and obviously the players agreed to a draw shortly after this position. But bishop b4 was still his main answer here. Castle, castle, bishop takes c6, and now we will see the game I mentioned earlier, Winter against Capablanca, where he immediately after the opening takes over positionally and achieves a very nice positional advantage. c5, and now knight d5 is a mistake clearly, because black can play g5, and well, this pawn cannot be taken because of knight takes d5. And after knight takes f6, queen takes f6, bishop g3. The problem here is that white will get a double pawn on the f-file, and that's not that much of a problem. The more of a problem is the bishop on g3, which will never be free again, because there's simply no way for white to get this bishop out. And this is a very nice position advantage here, and Capablanca managed to win this game later by playing on the queen side. There were also games where he was faced with bishop c4, bishop c5, and now c3, knight f6, and he was knowledgeable in this Italian game here. He knew how to play d5 here, the important move to equalize, and against Tarrasch he didn't really have any problems here. With the nice outpost on d5, position is approximately equal. So now bishop b5, the Reeh Lopez. And against Lasker in particular, he had some bad experiences with a6, because Lasker played a Spanish exchange variation and won a nice endgame against Capablanca. So after that he never really played a6 against Lasker again. He liked to play with knight f6 in the World Championship match against him. And here Capablanca is playing this position and is giving white the center kind of, but again his position is very stable, very solid, and that was the most important factor for him. Bishop e7. Now in one game Lasker took on c6 and gave up his bishop, and of course here Capablanca keeps the bishop and plays back to d7, and with the bishop pair Black has a nice little advantage, even though, of course, white is here also completely fine. But in the end, Capablanca managed to win this game. In two other games, Lasker just simply played Rook e1, but also here, once again, the position is so solid. And Capablanca is a very good defender, so it is not surprising that Lasker didn't really get anything out of this games here. Alright, now let's have a look at a6. If bishop takes c6 here, I mean, Capablanca wasn't afraid of the endgame, clearly. He just had this one bad experience against Lasker, so he didn't play it against Lasker again, but against other players definitely. And usually in this type of endgame, in most cases just the better player wins. And here Capablanca playing against Bienstock, position is about equal, and well, like I said, the better player wins, and then in this case it was Capablanca. Okay, bishop a4 now. And now mostly he played again this Steinitz kind of variation with d6. He also played knight f6. And here we see some Ruy Lopez variations again. b5, bishop b3, d6, c3, and now knight a5, bishop c2, c5. Typical moves here from both sides. And here, important moment to play b4 and to keep this a file closed, and the knight on a5 feels very safe now. And one game against Karras, continue with c takes b4, knight bd2, bishop b7, but you can see all the black pieces are on very good squares and black doesn't have any problems here. Alright. But he also liked to continue with d6, as I said. And we will just take a look briefly at the game against Yates. And once again we have this solid approach here. And this may be a little bit unusual to play the bishop to g7 in this kind of position, but it's definitely working. And you can see here the knight goes to e7, and it's just a solid position for black. And here Capablanca sees a way to equalize completely, and he goes for it. He exchanged a lot of pieces, but in the end he can play his queen to a nice square on f6, and there's no doubt that he has achieved equality here against Yates, and the game indeed ended in a draw later on. Well, that was the video about first e4 and how Capablanca responded. As you've seen, and as you probably already guessed before the video, Capablanca wouldn't go for crazy variations. He played solely once again, played e5 usually, and he didn't mind giving up the center and just having his own position without weaknesses, as we've seen in this last game, for example. And he was just confident in himself that he would be able to equalize sooner or later. Alright, one video left, and we'll take a look at first d4 and how Capablanca responded then. See you then.